From Monday, South Korea and the U.S. began staging their annual joint military exercise dubbed Ulchi Freedom Shield for the next 4 days to beef up their defense readiness against threats coming from North Korea, but with adjustments to its field training drills to ease tensions with the North. President Lee called for taking steps where necessary to implement existing inter-Korean agreements, pointing out the need for courage to ease tensions on the Korean Peninsula while maintaining an ironclad defense posture. And the Trump administration has now expanded 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum to include 407 new derivative items starting local time on Monday. South Korea and the U.S. launched their annual summertime military exercise, Ulchi Freedom Shield, on Monday, aimed at strengthening their defense against evolving security threats. Our Pyongyang has our top story.
The annual Ulchi Freedom Shield joint military exercise between South Korea and the United States began today. The combined drills, aimed at defending the Korean Peninsula in the event of a contingency, will run through the 28th.
This is a defensive exercise conducted annually, and this year's scenarios incorporate realistic threats, including those analyzed from recent wartime situations.
The exercise has also been strengthened to prepare for new security challenges, such as drone, GPS, and cyber attacks, as well as advanced weapons powered by cutting-edge technology. Around 18,000 South Korean troops are taking part, about the same as last year, along with a similar number of U.S. troops. About half of the 40 planned field drills have been postponed to next month, with the ongoing heat waves cited as reason for the adjustment. While Pyongyang dismissed the drills, concerns remain that it may use the UFS as a pretext for provocations. In a statement last Thursday, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, called the joint drills worthless and futile. At a briefing on Monday, when asked about preemptive measures to help improve inter-Korean relations, South Korea's Ministry of National Defense said it had no specific updates for now.
I don't have anything specific to share at this point. What I can say is that the Ministry of National Defense will continue to support the government's efforts to establish peace on the Korean Peninsula, while maintaining military readiness and steadily pursuing effective measures to ease tensions.
Meanwhile, a 20-minute nationwide civil defense drill will take place on Wednesday at 2 p.m. The drill will involve air raid evacuation training and exercises to clear the way for fire trucks, ambulances, and other rescue vehicles. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
Coinciding with the start of the nationwide Ulchi exercise, President Lee held a cabinet meeting today. He asked his officials to prepare to implement existing inter-Korean agreements in phases, saying true security lies in maintaining peace. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
The state's top priority is to protect the lives and safety of the people. That's according to President Lee Jae-myung as he presided over a cabinet meeting on the first day of the nationwide Ulchi exercise.
복합 위기에 대비한 통합적인 안보 역량이 필요한 상황입니다. 이번 을지 연습을 통해서 우리의 안보 태세를 면밀히 점검하고 국가의 총체적인 위기 관리 능력을 한층 더 발전시켜 나갔으면 좋겠습니다.
The 4-day Ulchi civil defense drills involving more than 580,000 people at some 4,000 public institutions are designed to reinforce government readiness and run parallel to the South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises. This year's focus is on fending off new security threats, including drone and cyber attacks. At the same time, South Korea's commander-in-chief noted true security lies in safeguarding peace.
작은 실천들이 조약돌처럼 쌓이면 상호 간의 신뢰가 회복될 것이고 또 평화의 길도 넓어져서 남북이 함께 성장할 수 있는 그런 토대도 마련될 것입니다.
For that, he instructed relevant ministries to prepare implementing existing inter-Korean agreements in phases, first starting with those possible to carry out. A reconciliatory message was evident in Yi's Liberation Day speech last Friday, where he vowed to gradually restore the 2018 military agreement.
The Ulchi exercise is designed to protect our people's lives and safety. It is defensive in nature and has no intention of attacking North Korea or raising tensions on the Korean peninsula.
On top of that, noting the popularity of the Netflix hit animation K-pop Demon Hunters, the president asked for comprehensive measures to support K-content going global, calling the power of culture a new driving force for national strength. Approved on Monday were more than a dozen bills, some of which were vetoed by Yi's predecessor, including the DP-led broadcasting bill revision, aimed at changing the governance structures at public broadcasters, and a grain bill that mandates government intervention on rice prices.
Also on the discussion table was utilizing social media for government advertisements in the digital era. And the president mentioned the need to hold accountable any media that spreads disinformation. Yoon-min, Arirang News.
Echoing President Lee Jae-myung's dovish message towards the North, the government has set out its approach to relations with North Korea, saying it aims to rebuild trust across the border. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Restoring trust will be Seoul's policy towards North Korea under the Lee Jae-myung administration. On Monday, Unification Ministry spokesperson Koo Byung-sam announced the government will shift its approach, effectively scrapping the so-called unification doctrine of the previous administration. This comes after the president's Liberation Day address last week, where he made 3 commitments: to respect the North Korean regime, no unification through subjugating the North, and no hostile acts. Spokesperson Koo said this marks a clear departure from former President Yoon Suk-yeol's unification doctrine, which critics say presented subjugation of the North. Unveiled on Liberation Day last year, the now-abolished doctrine called for a unified Republic of Korea by encouraging grassroots calls for freedom and democracy by North Korean citizens. Speaking at a parliamentary committee on foreign affairs and unification, Unification Minister Chung Dong-young on Monday called for trust-building measures through reviving military communication and the 2018 deal on de-escalating border tensions with the North. However, he said inter-Korean dialogue might take time to materialize. At the same committee session, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun said Yi's new dovish policy will be anchored in close coordination with the United States. Pursuing inter-Korean dialogue alongside U.S.-North Korea negotiations, the minister said Seoul and Washington will reaffirm a unified stance on North Korea and create conditions for renewed dialogue. He added Seoul envisions a phased approach to denuclearization, a gradual process of freezing, reducing, then dismantling the North nuclear program. South Korea will also seek cooperation from China in encouraging denuclearization and regional stability while responding firmly to unilateral actions in the West Sea. With Russia, Seoul will continue dialogue to protect Korean citizens and businesses, but Cho reiterated strong opposition to Moscow's ongoing military cooperation with Pyongyang, calling it a direct security threat. North Korea so far has not issued a response to South Korea's new policy direction. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung met with U.S. Senators Tammy Duckworth and Andy Kim at the Yongsan presidential office on Monday. According to presidential spokesperson Kang Yoo-jung, President Lee asked the U.S. Congress to play a key role in broadening the alliance to include the economy, science, and technology. He also expressed hope that his summit with President Trump next week will deliver tangible results in various areas, such as shipbuilding. Reaffirming Congress's bipartisan support for the ironclad alliance, the senators noted that President Lee's decision to visit Japan before Washington reflects his determination to further strengthen South Korea-Japan relations and trilateral cooperation with the U.S. The United States expanded 50% steel and aluminum tariffs are officially in effect. These duties now cover 407 additional derivative goods, sparking widespread concerns. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young has this report.
The broadened tariff measures apply to products imported into the U.S. or released from bonded warehouses starting Monday. These additional tariffs, initially announced last Friday by the Trump administration, primarily target the steel and aluminum content within these derivative products. Specifically, a 50% tariff will be levied only on the value attributable to the steel and aluminum components. The expansion follows requests from U.S. domestic industries in May, which were then solidified by the U.S. Department of Commerce after a period of stakeholder consultation in June. These measures fall under Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act, citing national security as the rationale. However, Korea has strongly asserted that Korean products do not pose a threat to U.S. national security. Despite these appeals, the Commerce Department largely approved its domestic industry's claims, excluding only about 60 items already under other Section 232 measures or investigations. The burden on the Korean exports is bound to be heavy.
The 50% tariff hike will severely diminish the price competitiveness of Korean firms, likely shrinking their U.S. market share. With many previously untaxed derivative products now included, Korean firms face significant risks of losing existing clients, struggling to find new ones, and grappling with increased production costs and long-term contract issues with U.S. partners.
Concerns are growing in Seoul, with the Trade Ministry on Monday stating that the U.S. could further expand its 50% tariff list for steel and aluminum derivative products. These additional items are expected as early as September, fueled by ongoing requests from U.S. industries. The Trade Ministry has pledged to significantly expand its support programs for SMEs affected by import regulations. This includes broadening consultation services for verifying steel and aluminum content and providing proof of origin, while also substantially reducing the financial contributions required from companies for these support services. 문지영, Arirang News.
Staying in the U.S., U.S. President Donald Trump has promised a big progress on Russia, despite failing to achieve any peace deal in his recent meeting with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Trump will now meet with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, on Monday. Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump, in a social media post on Sunday, promised big progress on Russia. However, he did not provide any details on what progress has been made since the no-deal after summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin last Friday in Alaska. According to sources cited by Reuters, Washington and Moscow have floated proposals under which Russia would give up small pockets of occupied Ukrainian territory in exchange for Kyiv ceding fortified land in the east and freezing front lines elsewhere. But most importantly for Kyiv, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says a security guarantee is something Washington will continue to push for Ukraine.
In the meantime, the one thing we do know that Ukraine has said repeatedly and publicly talked about is security guarantees. That's a very reasonable request. That's something we're working on, and that's something the Russian side has to understand, obviously.
Washington has also discussed the possibility of a defense pact, as Trump's envoy to Russia, Steve Witkoff, told Fox News on Sunday that the U.S. and its European partners could offer Ukraine NATO-style security guarantees outside the alliance framework as part of a settlement.
It means that the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
Meanwhile, European and NATO leaders announced they will stand with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Washington on Monday, presenting a united front as Trump pursues peace talks with Russia. Leaders from Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Finland are joining Zelenskyy after his exclusion from Trump's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin last Friday. Their show of support comes after a tense Oval Office meeting in February when Trump clashed with Zelenskyy in a heated exchange. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, the special counsel questioned former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, who has been arrested on corruption charges on Monday for the second time since her arrest. Her close associate was also questioned by the team on the same day. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Former First Lady Kim Gun-hee and close associates appeared at the special counsel's office on Monday. Kim's questioning ended at around 4 p.m., about 6 hours after it began at 10 a.m. This comes as special counsel Min Jung-gi investigates corruption allegations against the former First Lady, with Monday's session focusing on her alleged interference in candidate nominations during past elections and stock price manipulation. As in her previous questioning last Thursday, according to the team, Kim refused to answer most of the team's questions. It was Kim Gun-hee's second questioning since her arrest last week after a court issued an arrest warrant with detention. Although the team plans to hold another round of questioning on Wednesday, Kim's side said the schedule needs to be adjusted due to her health issues. Kim Ye-sung, who's often described as the butler of her family, also appeared at the office. It was his first session since being taken into custody on Friday on charges of embezzling $2.4 million from IMS Mobility, a company in which he holds a stake. Prosecutors suspect he diverted part of the funds into another firm he effectively controlled. Investigators also examined whether the embezzled money or other profits were funneled to Kim Gun-hee's family. The same day, a shaman named Chun Sung-bae was also questioned over allegations that he delivered requests for business favors along with luxury gifts from the Unification Church to the former First Lady. Meanwhile, the Seoul Central District Court held a hearing on Monday on former President Yoon Suk-yeol's insurrection and abuse of power charges without him present, as he has refused to attend. Yoon has skipped all 5 hearings in the insurrection case since his rearrest, citing health problems. His representative said he will attend once his condition improves, but declined to provide details on his current health. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Seoul City is adding a new mode of public transport, this time on water. The city's new river ferry system, the Hangang Bus, is set to officially launch this September. Our Park Hyo-bin was on board.
In a city driven by cars, buses, and subways, this one moves differently. No rails, no tires, just water. This is the Hangang Bus, Seoul's new ferry-based public transport, designed to connect key spots along the Hangang River.
This ferry just left Apgujeong and is now heading to Yeouido. The view from here is stunning. You can see the river, bridges, and tall buildings, all in one frame.
Ahead of its official launch in September, the city began offering early test rides for residents to experience the new service firsthand. As the ferry glides across the water, slicing through the breeze with the skyline in full view, smiles spread among passengers on board.
It was really fun riding the Hangang Bus. It made me feel happy.
It's very refreshing. I'd say the view is very good. Excellent.
I've been on ferries abroad, but seeing one as public transport in Seoul is amazing. The view is beautiful. It feels completely different being on the river instead of just looking at it.
Step inside and it feels far from your typical subway or bus. Panoramic windows and ceiling skylights flood the interior with natural light. Nearly 200 seats are paired with foldable tray tables, and there's even a cafe corner where passengers can grab a quick snack or drink. The ferry is scheduled to operate 2 main routes starting in September. The Hangang Bus operates a 75-minute one-way route linking 7 stops from west to eastern Seoul and returns along the same path. For faster travel, a 54-minute express route is also available. What's more, the ferry runs on a hybrid propulsion system, cutting carbon emissions, and it has passed all required safety tests and certifications. A one-way ticket costs 3,000 won, or about $2 for adults, with transfer discounts available through the city's transit card system. Whether you're commuting, sightseeing, or simply taking a break from the city's rush, the Hangang Bus offers a moment to slow down and see Seoul from a whole new perspective. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
It is time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Nietzsche, joining us in the studio. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
So, Paul, let's start with this. Heung-min, he started his MLS match over the weekend. How did that go?
Yes, well, he started and he got his first assist for LAFC and indeed in the MLS. After making his debut off the bench last week, Son was named in the starting lineup for LAFC's home match against the New England Revolution on Saturday. His assist came in injury time to tee up Matthew Chouanier to make it 2-0. Son was deployed as a central striker and had 4 shots, 2 of which found the target. He created 5 chances, the most by any single player in the match. Up next for LAFC and Son is FC Dallas away on Saturday local time. His team sit 5th in the Western Conference. The top 7 make it through to the final series directly.
Now, Paul, maybe next week we'll be talking about his first MLS goal, hopefully.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to baseball, we had a Korean derby in MLB. Tell us.
Yes, right. We had Lee Jong-hoo facing Kim Ha-sung, and Kim Ha-sung and his team, the Tampa Bay Rays, won the 3-game series 2-1. The last encounter, which was their last meeting of the season, ended in a 7-1 win for the Giants. He went 1 for 4, a double that opened the game for the Giants in the bottom of the first inning. Kim, batting at number 6, went 2 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. He hit a single 2E in centre in his first at-bat at the top of the second. He singled again in the top of the 5th. Both recorded hits and steals in the second game of the series on Saturday, which ended in a 2-1 Rays win. Both scored runs in Friday's match as well, which ended in a 7-6 win for the Rays.
Well, sticking with baseball, I understand KBO has another new single-season sellout record, right?
Yes, it's set by the Hanwha Eagles last Wednesday. The record of 48 was extended the following day with a 49th sellout from 55 home matches. This beats the record of 47 that was also set by the Eagles last season. But this season's record has come at their brand new stadium, Daejeon Hanwha Life Ballpark, that has 5,000 more seats than their old ground. Their total attendance for the season surpassed 900,000 for the first time ever on Wednesday. The Eagles are second in the standings, just 2 games behind the LG Twins. They return home against the Doosan Bears on Tuesday.
And last but not least, to golf, some encouraging performances by some South Korean stars. Tell us.
Yes, that's right. First of all, Im Sung-jae in the PGA Tour playoffs.
Right.
He will play in his 7th straight Tour Championship this year, the longest streak by any South Korean golfer. This comes after he finished 28th in the FedEx Cup standings after the BMW Championship over the weekend. Only the top 30 make it through. This is all despite finishing at 10 over par. Meanwhile, former world #1 Park Sung-hyun finished in a LPGA top 10 for the first time in 6 years. Park finished 7th at the Portland Classic at 16 under par 272. However, she will need to finish in the top 80 to stay on the LPGA Tour next year. Before the weekend, she was ranked 147th.
All right, Paul, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for that roundup.
Thank you. See you.
The hot weather with high humidity is still in full swing today. Heat wave advisories are in place in the central areas, including Seoul, and heat wave warnings have also been issued for the southern parts of the country. This heat wave will continue for the time being. Rain has been falling in the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province today. Looking at the amount of rainfall, about 5 to 60 millimeters is expected, and more than 80 millimeters of rain could fall in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do province by tonight. Tomorrow morning will start warm at 23 to 26 degrees Celsius all over the country. Daily highs move up to 30 degrees in Seoul, Gyeongju and Daegu 34 degrees. Rain clouds will appear often around the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province early this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그 특유의 따뜻함과 약간 사람의 목소리 같은 목소리를 갖고 있거든요, 바이올린이. 저는 무대에 올랐을 때보다는 이제 혼자 연습할 때 더 큰 희열을 느끼는데 제가 표현하고자 하는 음악이 잘 나왔을 때 그때 가장 큰 기쁨을 느끼는 것 같아요. 그래서 저만의 색깔을 어떻게 하면 찾아갈 수 있을까 그걸 제일 많이 고민하는 것 같아요. 아무래도 연습을 할 때는 이제 생각과 고민을 많이 하는 반면에 무대에서 연주할 때는 정말 머릿속을 비우고 아무 생각도 안 하려고 하는 것 같아요. 무대에서는 자유롭게 콩쿨 무대도 저만의 독주라고 생각하는 자세를 가지려고 하고 있어요. 사실 바이올린과는 거의 제 인생의 대부분을 같이 해왔기 때문에 저를 힘들게 할 때도 많지만 제가 가장 사랑하고 아끼는 존재입니다. 작곡가가 전달하고 싶은 메시지와 또 제 자신이 관객들에게 전달하고 싶은 메시지를 모두 다 설득력 있게 잘 전달할 수 있는 그런 연주자가 되고 싶습니다.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewers Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 에이펙은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 에이펙 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. South Korea marked its 80th Liberation Day with a pointed message from President Lee Jae-myung acknowledging Japan's efforts on historical issues, but firmly shifting the focus towards future cooperation. Just days later, Japan's Prime Minister Ishiba referenced regret in a rare statement, though without offering a formal apology. Now, with summits scheduled first in Tokyo and then in Washington, President Lee's diplomatic itinerary is drawing attention. Meanwhile, issues like North Korea's nuclear threat, regional security alignments, and growing U.S. pressure on defense cost sharing all come into play. So with the stakes rising, the question now is, where is South Korea headed in this evolving geopolitical puzzle? For answers to this, we connect to Choi Hyun-jin, professor of political science at Kyunghee University. Welcome, Professor.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Christophe Godin, professor of political science at Heung-min University. Good to see you, Professor.
Yes, good to see you again.
So let's start with Professor Che, of course, with President Lee Jae-myung's Liberation Day address held on August 15th. So there he acknowledged Japan's recent gestures on historical issues, while also calling for future-oriented mutual cooperation. What do you think is the diplomatic strategy behind this message towards Japan?
I think his Liberation Day speech carried a very realistic and also strategic message. By mentioning Japan's past action, he showed that Korea is not ignoring past history, but at the same time, by stressing a future-oriented and also mutually beneficial relationship, he made it clear that Seoul wants to move forward. The key idea here is the balance. Korea is respecting history, which is very important to the minds of Korean people. But at the same time, it is telling Japan we can build trust through cooperation in security, economy, and technology. And this kind of a speech shows the Lee administration's style of pragmatic diplomacy. The recent survey in South Korea showed that so many Korean people still do not fully trust Japan. However, at the same time, they are willing to cooperate with the United States and Japan in security affairs because it helps South Korea's national interests. And this shows that the Korean people have a very practical mindset toward Japan. And I think this Lee administration's foreign policy towards Japan follow the same practical way of thinking. So this kind of idea was clearly shown in his Liberation Day speech.
Right. So the message seems quite deliberate, acknowledging the past, but clearly pivoting towards a future cooperation. Now, on Japan's side, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba marked the anniversary of Japan's World War II defeat by mentioning regret, which is the first such reference by a Japanese leader in 13 years. Professor Godang, However, he still offered no apology for, the colonial ruling. How should we interpret this approach by the Japanese head?
I think, in reality, the Japanese Prime Minister is working on a very thin line. Because on the one hand, the past history has been the main obstacle, the main impediment to restoring peaceful Japanese-Korean relations, and this Japanese-Korean alliance is more needed than ever now because of Trump administration's tariffs. The issue is that, for instance, I'm European. So from a European perspective, the difference between Japan and Germany is mind-blowing. The big difference is that Germany, after World War II, apologized formally, and this paved the way to more peaceful relations and eventually the building of the European Union. In the case of Japan, as you mentioned, Prime Minister Ishiba has expressed remorse, regret, etc. But still, the phrasing remains relatively vague because he wouldn't say actually what he was regretting specifically. In fact, what I think, this would be a more personal opinion, but I think that the Japanese government wants to move forward because Japan needs Korea and Korea needs Japan now. But it is difficult for Prime Minister Ishiba to be more specific because, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, a far-right-wing party, a populist far-right-wing party has emerged in Japan during the general elections a couple of weeks ago. And it makes it very difficult for the Japanese Prime Minister not to express conservative and nationalistic views. So I think he just pushed his stance as far as he could go without looking provocative to this more extreme part of the Japanese public opinion.
Right. Of course, the Prime Minister also has to take into consideration domestic political atmosphere in the country. But this absence of apology does seem to leave a little bit of gap between the two countries still. But both leaders, however, are sending signals of goodwill. Attention now turns to the summit between the leaders of Korea and Japan set for August 23rd. Professor Che, what stands out is that President Lee will visit Japan before heading to the U.S., which is kind of an unusual sequence. What strategic message is behind this itinerary?
I think visiting Japan first is a strong signal. It shows that Korea values Tokyo as much as Washington, and treating Japan in its own right, not as a byproduct of a U.S.-Korea alliance anymore. And by visiting Japan first, President Lee is signaling that the South Korea wants to manage the relation with Japan more directly and also independently. And there is also a larger security region as well. The world is becoming more uncertain nowadays. Both Korea and Japan are facing very tough trade policies from America, and also the role of American troops stationed in East Asia could change in the near future. And therefore, in this uncertain situation, the cooperation between the two countries, between Korea and Japan, becomes more important than ever. And therefore, I think the President Lee is laying the groundwork for stronger cooperation in security and economy with Japan. And there is also economic angle as well. Both Korea and Japan are facing challenges from protectionist trade policies in the United States, and also we are facing greater challenges from Chinese companies. And in this situation, closer cooperation between the two countries could help both nations protect their supply chain, especially in semiconductors and advanced technology. And therefore, this visit can send one message. Korea wants to build real trust with Japan before stepping onto the larger stage in Washington, D.C.
Right. So we are definitely seeking for ways of cooperation in various sectors. Now, let's delve deeper into the summit itself. Professor Gurang, what key issues do you think we could expect to dominate the agenda? And also, I wonder if you see any potential for meaningful progress on matters like joint responses to North Korea or, cooperation in a changing trade environment?
Well, to add up on what Professor Choi just mentioned, the first point I think is worth mentioning is that President Lee's diplomacy is quite proactive. Lee Jae-myung, during his campaign, will not discuss honestly, most of the time, he dodged international issues every time he was questioned about them. Now, what we see is that this summit with Japan comes fast, with a very specific agenda. And to answer your question, so about North Korea or about trade development, etc., my money is definitely on trade issues, because Korea and Japan are facing the same issues as Professor Choi mentioned, to protect their supply chain. And both Japan and Korea are to be hit very severely by these tariffs that Trump just imposed on aluminum, steel, and probably more is coming in the next days or weeks. So Korea and Japan, as far as we can tell, are finding a way to put the past behind and to elaborate some sort of common strategy. This strategy, what will it be? We don't know for sure yet, but it is a huge step forward. When it comes to North Korea's denuclearization, I would be less optimistic, because in reality, South Korea and Japan have no leverage on North Korea. The only countries that could pressure North Korea efficiently could be China or maybe Russia, but of course, they are not part of this summit. Now, this summit, the way I see it, is to be very, very, very tariff-oriented, most likely.
So there's a real potential for discussions here on joint security and trade cooperation, but a little bit less in the North Korea front. So since this Korea-Japan summit comes just ahead of the South Korea-U.S. summit, it seems trilateral coordination is critical. And in particular, aligning with Tokyo may even help reinforce the credibility of America's extended deterrence, including its nuclear umbrella. Professor Choi, why is prior coordination with Japan so important? And do you think it could yield actual benefits?
You just mentioned the nuclear umbrella and also extended deterrence. They basically imply the same thing. The concept of extended deterrence is very important for the security of both countries. But in the end, we have to acknowledge that the actual working of extended deterrence depends on the mind of American president, that is Donald Trump. And also in reality, his East Asia policy is no longer centered on stopping North Korean nuclear threats. And also, honestly speaking, it is not even clear how much he values the security of his allies under his America First approach. So I think we don't need to expect it too much that, the talks with Japan will help, influence and strengthen extended deterrence policy of the United States. But interestingly, this kind of uncertainty itself makes cooperation between the two countries, Korea and Japan, more important than ever. In fact, the history shows that Korea and Japan tend to work more closely together when the security commitments of the United States become weaker. And that is the current situation. And for this region, now both countries are facing the same set of security threat. That is China's aggressive actions in the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea, and North Korea's missile and nuclear program, and also weakening American security commitments in East Asia. So in this situation, the stronger cooperation between Seoul and Tokyo, I think, is the best way to prepare for the uncertain future and to reinforce security.
Indeed, it really does feel like aligning with Japan ahead of the U.S. summit could be a strategic necessity for South Korea. Now, when talking about the two countries, historical tensions cannot be ruled out, and it hasn't been resolved yet. Professor Godang, in your view, do you think there's any chance the two leaders could make any headway on these long-standing disputes during their talks?
What we can see is that both leaders, that is President Lee and Prime Minister Ishiba, they did the best they could to come to some sort of agreement, some sort of settlement, without bringing up any points of contention between both countries. For instance, typically, the Dokdo issue, or Takeshima in Japanese, was never mentioned. So there is an obvious will for both governments because, as Professor Choi mentioned, they need each other, particularly when the US power shows weaker or less reliable, to put it mildly. So both countries need one another. And what both leaders have been trying to do, the way I see it, leafing over their declarations, is that they decided to address the past, but relatively vaguely. For instance, the way Prime Nishima did when he mentioned regretting the past without being too specific about the past. The way I see it, it is a smart strategy because for domestic reasons, both Korea and Japan are facing a rise of the far right. So it wouldn't be wise from governments to inflammate these nationalistic passions. It seems that President Lee and Prime Minister Ishiba are trying to implement a sort of step-by-step approach because both countries share similar interests, and eventually, hopefully, as people, as nations work closer, it is not unreasonable to hope that eventually they will grow closer. The Trump administration is here for at least almost 4 years, and during these 4 years, I think both countries, Korea and Japan, have understood that they wouldn't be able to count on the US as much as they used to in the past.
Right, so it's a very tough time to touch upon sensitive issues in this very unstable geopolitical environment. Now, let's also touch upon the South Korea-U.S. summit. With defense cost sharing and the strategic flexibility of U.S. forces on the table, alliance modernization is likely to be a central theme there. Professor Che, how should South Korea navigate what many call Washington's so-called security invoice?
The upcoming talk in Washington will not be easy. The President Trump may connect tariff and defense cost sharing and also even wider alliance issues together. And his team could ask Korea to almost double its defense cost sharing. And also he may push for a stronger support for the strategic flexibility of American troops stationed in South Korea. So this means Korea must prepare for very tough negotiation. And from our side, we should be firm, but also practical. On the defense cost sharing issue, we can explain that we already provide large support. We are hosting American troops, and also we are paying much of the base operation in Pyeongtaek, and also we are contributing to deterrence against North Korea. We must also emphasize that too much increase in defense cost sharing could weaken Korean public support for the alliance. On strategic flexibility issue, we can show some understanding of the necessity of the larger role of USFK, for example, in the Taiwan Strait or in the South China Sea. But we must clearly say that sending Korean troops into combat, especially in situations involving China, will always be our own choice. So my view is that this talk will be very difficult because of this kind of issues.
Right. A lot of big events to discuss on the table. Now, let's also touch upon North Korea then. Denuclearization will no doubt be a key topic, of course. And with both Seoul and Washington maintaining firm resolve, do you think there's a realistic path to more advanced agreements this time around, Professor Godang?
Unfortunately, I will be quite pessimistic here, because what we have seen in North Korean diplomacy over the last 2 years, more or less, is very clear. North Korea is shifting away from China and more closely to Russia, to the point, as you know, of sending troops, of dispatching North Korean troops, so in Ukraine, to fight along the Russian military. I understand that you're right, probably President Lee and Prime Minister Ishiba are to discuss North Korea because it is the most pressing issue when it comes to joint security in the area. But realistically, there is little, unfortunately, that Korea or Japan can do by themselves. It would require a higher power to pressure on North Korea. And when North Korea decides to deepen ties with Russia, the message that Kim Jong-un is sending is very clear. What Kim Jong-un wants is maximal isolation. For him, the nuclear weapon is the ultimate guarantee that his country will never be invaded, the way, for instance, Iraq was by American forces in 2003. And it's very interesting to see that as North Korea decides to get increasingly isolated, North Korea decides to get closer to Russia, who's getting increasingly isolated as well. It almost feels like Russia is turning into a sort of giant North Korea, and both North Koreas, the small one and the bigger one, are somehow getting closer and closer. So long story short, to answer your question, I don't think there is much, unfortunately, that Japan or South Korea can do by themselves.
Right. Russia becoming a giant North Korea, it's definitely concerning for many countries around the world. We'll have to keep close tabs on that and look forward to the results of the summit. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Godang.
Thanks a lot.
And Professor Che, we really appreciate it.
Very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark